Good morning, everybody. This is John from Louisville, filling in for Joe. Um, Heard from Joe this morning, and he's feeling well. The way he put it was he felt like a snail climbing Mount Fuji. So he wants to rest today. Um, and I think we'll grant him that privilege of resting. So I wanted to open this morning with a quote from Thomas Keating. Uh, he's a Cistercian monk that was at Snowmass in Colorado. And Keating said that God's first language is silence. Everything else is a poor translation. So today, I want to talk about the poetry of silence. And right away, as soon as you say that, you're all of a sudden in the territory of paradox. Because how can you talk about something, use words to describe something that has no words, in fact, has no sound? Um, so that's an interesting thing to think about. And we're going to look at it from several different aspects today. But before that, I wanted to talk just a minute or two about the opening music. If you missed it, it's really extraordinary piece of music from a musician named Sam Lee. He's a British folk singer songwriter and nature lover. And he had the brilliant idea of taking this music into the forest where he knew a nightingale nest was, and play his music, record it live, and see what happens. So that recording, I'm going to ask Jill to play a couple of minutes of the recording, so if you missed it, you can hear what it sounds like. But this was it was recorded live in the forest. There's nothing added, nothing taken away. It's just as it actually happened. And the nightingale is known all across Europe as to have the most beautiful bird song of any birds in Europe. And I think the reason why it's so beautiful is because the sound seems to emerge out of a well of silence and then falls back into that emptiness. So each little chirp and peep and twitter that you hear are islands surrounded by silence. So Jill, would you go ahead and play a couple of minutes, please? Are you muted?
It just takes a minute to do all the clicks. Bear with me.
Yeah, I hear you now. Yeah. That's enough. So extraordinary, isn't it? And if you notice, the musicians and the nightingale got into kind of a call and response uh, mode with each other, and the nightingale would change pitch and change tempo according to what the musicians were playing. So what we're going to do today is I've got 9 poems I want to share with you today. Each one uh, attempts to capture the essence of silence, and each one explores a different facet of the one diamond of silence. So we're going to start with the first poem we're going to look at or hear. Comes from our old friend Rumi, and it's only 6 words, but it's 6 important words. Silence is the root. Silence is the root of everything. Silence is the root of everything. Well, I'm no nightingale, but I try to create little islands of sound surrounded by silence. I don't know if it worked or not, but that was the attempt. Our second poem comes from is a contemporary poet. His name is Adyashanti. Um, and it's also a very short little poem. And so he talks about silence not being a lack of anything, but something new and something possible. This is what he says. Silence is not just the lack of sound. It is a door opener. So when I think of a door, I think of a threshold that leads into some sort of liminal space. And that liminal space can be, for one person, be peace and tranquility. For another person, it may be some sort of scary, unknown territory. So something to think about later on in your own meditation is, what does silence open for you? What does the door of silence make available to you? Just think about that. It's a threshold into liminal space. So the third poem I'm going to offer up today is by a man named Harkite Kano. He's a Basque poet, and this is a translation by Elizabeth Macklin. Um, and this is called a list poem. Um, and list poems are very popular because they're very easy to write. And you start with a prompt, um, and I'll explain what that means later. You start with a prompt, and that prompt will evoke responses. So and well, how many of you out there make lists? Yeah, I I'm guilty of actually being out in the yard, seeing something that needs to be done, and do it, and then come back in the house, and I actually add it to a list just so I can check it off. Has anybody else done that, or am I the only crazy one? But so this is a list poem, and the thing about list poems is that the list poem loves diversity. So you can have one line that's specific, and then the next line be very general and maybe very vague. You can have one line that's funny, one line that's serious, a different line that's vulnerable. The list poems are like Fight Club. There are no rules. And the same with list poems. The first rule of list poems is there are no rules. Um, so here's this poem from Kano. It's called 15 Reasons to Remain Silent. Because I have nothing to say. Because though I've got plenty to say, you're not paying attention. Because I'd rather listen to what you're saying. So as not to talk to myself, so as not to talk to the wall, so as not to talk to the crack in the wall, so as not to waken the cricket who lives in the crack in the wall. Because they've sealed my lips with honey, because I'm kissing you, because I'm sulking, because I'm sulking and I'm kissing you, because I like to remain silent, because our breath is speaking all on its own, because I'm keeping a secret larger than words, because my heart is in my mouth. Poem number 4 that we're going to look at is also a list poem, and this one comes from Billy Collins. And in this poem, he talks about different flavors of silence, I'm going to call it. There's a silence that is associated with fear and astonishment. There's a silence associated with beauty. There's a silence associated with painful loss and loving and longing. A silence associated with stillness, and a silence associated with natural things like the sun and the moon. So this is Billy Collins' take on with his poem simply titled Silence. There is a sudden silence of the crowd above a player not moving on the field, and the silence of the orchid. The silence of the falling vase before it strikes the floor. The silence of the belt when it is not striking the child. The silence of the cup and the water in it, the silence of the moon and the quiet of the day far from the roar of the sun. The silence when I hold you to my chest, the silence of the window above us, and the silence when you rise and turn away. And there is the silence of the morning, which I have broken with my pen, a silence that has piled up all night, like snow falling in the darkness of our house. The silence before I wrote a word, and the poor silence now. Those last two lines are significant, I think. The silence before I wrote a word, and the poor silence now. He's saying that every time we try to speak about silence, we have already violated it. Poem number 5. And this comes from Rosemary Watola Tromer. And I've taken a couple of poetry workshops from her, and honestly, I have to give her credit for the inspiration of doing this talk in the first place. A lot of the ideas have been, she directed me to some of these different poets that I've never heard of before. And she herself is a really excellent poet. But she suggests if you really want to know about a subject or learn more about a subject, write a letter to it. So she suggests if you're thinking about silence, write a letter to silence. But before you write the letter, you have to decide what kind of letter is it going to be. Is it going to be an apology letter? Is it going to be a love letter, an invitation, a complaint? Or in this case, what Rosemary has written here is a confession. And the title of this poem is Confession to Silence. I say I love you, and then I start singing. I say I want you, and then I fill in each moment with conversation, with stories, with music, with the tap, tap, tap of my antsy foot. Silence, I come to your altar with hymns and prayers, when all you ask of me is that I come to you. With this confession already, I feel you spreading through my body, like the scent after rain, my cells opening to you, you filling them with all that glorious nothing. So something you may want to do in your own meditation time is to write your own letter to silence. Decide what kind of letter you want it to be and start it with Dear Silence and see what happens, see what comes out. Poem number 6 is from James Crews, Crews. And this poem from him is called Natural Silence. He evokes silence by talking about its opposite. So let me give you, oh, here it is right here. Okay, natural silence. It's not easy to find silence behind traffic noise and the rush of a jet dragging its contrails through the sky. But here it is again in the in-between, when I learned to listen long enough to the call and response of birdsong, the wind pulsing in the canopies of the trees, and every wing flutter of the phoebe, who's built her cup of a nest out of moss and mud beneath the eaves of our house. I know the stillness will last for just a few beats before the roar of a Harley takes over and a tractor rumbles through the rocky field outside my window. So I sink into it while I can, and I do as I do into water so clean and clear for a moment at least. I swear I can see the bottom of everything. For him, for James Kruse, the silence is flowing beneath the noise of being alive. Now, number 7, and I can't believe I'm actually going to do this, but I'm going to be the creamy filling of an Oreo between James Kruse and Pablo Neruda. I'm going to stick in one of my own poems here. And my poetry tends to be experiential, let's say. Each line is a vivid memory. So what I am offering up here is that I wrote 4 little haikus. So I call this a quadku. Each haiku is represents a season of the walking my dog in the park that you see behind me on the screensaver there. So this is coming directly from my experience of the different seasons of walking in this park. Silence is watching a leaf floating on the wind, orange sun going home. Silent tracks in snow, like arrows pointing toward food, ducks quacking God's name. Silence is fragrant white pear blossoms, open to offer pollen. Silence is one taste of mystery ripening in the gentle rain. Number 8, this is Pablo Neruda. It's his poem called Keeping Quiet. And in this, he poses a question. And the question is, what if? Now, we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his sore hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it's about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt the sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Now, I'll count to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. What would happen if we all kept silent, the whole world, for 12 heartbeats? And the last poem is from Danusha Ramirez, called Thinking. And in this poem, she talks about why is it we can't keep quiet? We all know about what Joe calls the monkey mind, and that's what she's getting at here. Thinking, don't you wish they could stop? All of the thoughts swirling around in your head like bees in a hive, dancers tapping their way across the stage. I should rake the leaves in the carport. I should buy Christmas lights. Was there really life on Mars? What am I going to cook for dinner? I walk up the driveway and put out the garbage bins. I should stop using plastic bags. A friend of mine whose husband just left her for the Swedish nanny. I wish I hadn't said Patrick's painting looked ominous. Maybe that's why he hasn't called. Does the car need oil again? There's a hole in the ozone the size of Texas, and everything seems to be speeding up. Come, let's stand by the window and look out at the light on the field. Let's watch how the clouds cover the sun and almost nothing stirs in the grass. So again, there's an image of a river of silence that's always already flowing below the chatter, below the clutter of life. And how much more does silence have to teach us?